Christian Parenting.
As Christian parents, we all want to be praying for our kids, but sometimes knowing what to pray can be really hard. And that's why Christian Parenting created A Great Cloud of Witnesses prayer journal to help busy parents just like you and me intentionally pray for your child and their faith all year long. This weekly journal walks through the lives of faithful men and women through Scripture, people like Abraham, Sarah, Moses, and Rahab, people who trusted an extraordinary God. It helps you pray boldly for your kids to follow in their footsteps, grow in character, deepen their faith, and trust God's plan. And as a bonus, every Monday on the Pardon the Mess podcast, Courtney DeFeo will be praying through the journal with you, so you are never doing it alone. You can visit cpgive.org and use the code CLOUD to get your special podcast listener discount. That's cpgive.org and use the code CLOUD. I cannot wait to pray with you this year. Hey everyone, welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Steph Thurling, and I am so glad that you're here today. This is an episode that you're likely going to relate to, and I want to start off with a question. Have you ever felt unqualified? Like you're faking it until you make it, or maybe like you're supposed to do more, but you're not sure what that is, or if you're ready. I definitely have felt that. And if you said yes to that, you're going to love hearing from our guest today, Mary Marantz, as she shares her story of overcoming and growth. Mary opens up about the struggles of self-doubt, the trap we so often fall in of playing small, and how fear can silence the very gifts that God has given us. She offers honest encouragement and practical tools to help you take small, faithful steps towards growth and God's calling in your life, even when fear tells you to stay put. All of this and more is then covered in her book, Underestimated. So if you love this conversation, go check that out for even more. This episode is both practical and encouraging, and I think that you're really going to love it. So enjoy. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast.
Hey, Steph. Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to hanging out with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. So I really like to start just like jumping right in, getting to know my guests. So tell us just a little about yourself and what you do and about your family and all the important things.
Yeah, so I always like to say kind of like the elevator pitch version of my story, if we're meeting for the very first time, is that I grew up in a single wide trailer in rural West Virginia, and I like to emphasize the single wide parts. A lot of people can kind of picture like a really nice double wide with a permanent foundation, and this was not that. Like whatever dilapidated, rundown, stock photo, picture in your head you have of a trailer in rural West Virginia. That's what it was. If you go to thebookdirt.com, actually, you can see the actual trailer. It's the cover of my first book, Dirt. My dad's a logger. His dad was a logger, 8 generations deep of loggers and coal miners in the West Virginia woods. And then you fast forward in my story a good bit, and I end up at Yale for law school, which is quite the whiplash moment. And on one hand, we think like that's not really the usual outcome we expect from a trailer in West Virginia. But on the other hand, Steph, it's also very much an underdog trope we've become really familiar with, this idea of humble beginnings to the Ivy League. And so in a lot of ways, both my story and then like what my story is sort of a caricature of it has come to stand for, both of those things have really kind of equipped me to write this third book, which is called Underestimated, the surprisingly simple shift to quit playing small, name the fear, and move forward anyway. And there's a second book in the middle there called Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots that's about giving up achieving for your worth. So if Dirt is about making peace with your past, give up achieving for your worth. Now we move forward to quit playing small and the good work we are put here to do.
I love your story. I think it's just so interesting. My brother-in-law has a very similar story. He is now he lived in the desert of California. He's now a very successful ophthalmologist in Florida. And it's just really, it's inspiring to hear his story about kind of those moments in his life that he was like, no, I want to do more. I want to do something different, and where he got his motivation and when he decided he was just going to go for it. So I'm excited to kind of dive in a little bit more with you today.
Yeah, I love that. I would just say real quick, I've been telling people that this book is very much for the person who feels like they're being called up to more, like your brother-in-law, who feel like they're being called up to greatness, and who also simultaneously at the very same time still doubt that someone like you will ever get there, that there's something in your story that both drives you to more and also makes you feel disqualified for more. And those two things feel like they're constantly in tension.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think the reason I was so drawn to this is that you hear the story like you or like my brother-in-law, and you're like, well, I'm not like, there's nothing really limiting me that much. But I think that if there to be a group of people that underestimates themselves, moms have got to be on the top of the list. And
that's right.
Women in general, I think, underestimate themselves a lot, but then you add mom to the title and you put yourself second. And then you begin this like slow process of like, am I enough? Am I supposed to do more? And does anything matter? And, because you pour so much into other people. So I think no matter where we grew up or where our story has gone so far, I think we can all really relate to underestimating ourselves and making ourselves feel small. I know I did. When I started this job, I was like, are you sure? Like, me? Right. Are you sure you want me to do this? We all have that doubt that we feel. So you talk a lot about playing small. And I just let's start with like, what's your definition of that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you asked that. And I also like what you were talking about earlier about how you instantly honed in on like, we do this to ourselves. Because I'll be honest with you, when I set out to write this book, Steph, I thought it was going to be 100% about how other people do this to us. I have spent a lot of my life feeling like, people look right through me, or they, I'm not the loud one in the room or the extroverted one in the room or the one who sucks all the oxygen out of the room. And so in any networking cocktail hour situation, you will find me off in the corner talking to one other person saying, tell me about all your hopes and fears. How was your childhood?
Yeah.
And so
I can relate to that.
But like time after time, those people have been wrong, right? Like I actually had a teacher in high school who said, if anybody's going to get out of Richwood, West Virginia, it will not be you. And I spent most of my life kind of bottling that up and using it as jet fuel. And there's actually a 2-word indictment of myself in the book of perceived slight, of like, if there isn't an actual slight, then I have to make one up in order to propel myself forward. And then I start writing the book, and a book will have opinions about what it wants to be. And this book was like, it's going to be 20% that, because it is a real thing that other people do this to us, but it's going to be 80% when we do it to ourselves. And so on the cover, along the top, above the title, it says, because the person counting you out the most just might be you. And so, you talk about moms and doing that to themselves, and we'll probably get into this more later, but I do just want to kind of set it up now that one of the things I talk about in chapter 7, all the chapters are these different faces fear puts on to keep us playing small. Chapter 7 is overthinking is an orange safety cone, and it will use these things I call bandwidth shifts that say, until there's more time, more money, more energy, more focus, more room in the calendar, we just shouldn't get started. It talks to us about this elusive someday when all of those things will line up perfectly. The stars will align, and today's not that day.
Life.
Right, exactly. But we believe fear when it tells us that, gosh, when the kids are in school, it'll be easier. When they're out of school, it'll be easier. When, things aren't so crazy at work, when we don't have this trip coming up. But there are always those things. And another year goes by and the clock goes on ticking and the world is worse for our absence. And so when I think about this idea of playing small, that's really what it is. Those places that we have been gifted, and those places where that intersects with the story we've been given, this crosshair intersection where our empathy informs our gifts, that has the power to change the world. And every day there's this sort of bump in our spirit that says, I know I'm not doing anything about that thing I can't go a day without thinking about. And we feel it. And yet another day goes by, the clock goes on ticking, the world is worse for our absence. And so there's a really great, powerful quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes that says, most people, Steph, are going to go to their graves with the music still inside them unplayed. And I think that should rattle our rib cages and shake us to our very core. Because when I say playing small, I don't mean that you're not allowed to have a simple life. I don't mean that you're not allowed to make an impact right in your home or right where you are, or right in your community. What I mean is you are hiding in plain sight from the places you're being called. And other people are worse because you are not showing up.
Yeah. I always just say, like, nobody did anything big by making themselves small.
Right.
And just like you said, that doesn't have to be like huge. Like, we don't have to go and write a book or do anything crazy, but like we are called to do something. And by not giving ourselves enough credit, like, the world is missing out.
That's right.
And that's really hard. It's a hard concept to grasp because of the fear that you talk about. So I want to dig into that a little bit. I think you kind of touched on this, but one of the quotes that was like highlighted in your book, you said, the reason fear is so good at tricking you is because it uses your own voice. And it was like big in there, and I was like, yes, and like circled it. And I just like love it. So like break that down a little bit more for a minute. And then I have maybe some follow-up questions about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So just as a little bit of like a background to even before we get to that point, I am an author and a podcaster and a speaker, and I also coach people who want to do those things. And about 2 years ago, I had a series of back-to-back coaching calls with my clients. And Steph, it was eerie how copy and paste the scripts coming out of their mouths were. Really was, was one of those. They were working on different projects, maybe at different like stages of life, but they were all like copy and paste, repeat, whatever, Mad Libs for fear coming out of their mouths. And fear was winning. And that was the part that was making me the most mad. And I found that like fear was doing that in my life as well. And I felt like fear was winning in my life as well. And so I hopped on Instagram and I didn't even like say anything. I just recorded this video, like no introduction. And I said, it's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done by somebody the world actually wants to pay attention to. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I'm perfect. What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does she think she is? What if I try and I fail? What if I prove everyone who said I couldn't do it that they were right about me all along? What if my voice doesn't really matter? What if I don't really matter? What if I start and I can't stay consistent with it? What if it's already too late? And I said, fear's not your friend. Start anyway. Start now. And that became kind of the like groundwork and background to when I was writing this book. These two dots connected in a way I'd never seen them connected before. It's this high every writer is chasing. And that is, what if fear attacks creatives in particular? And by that, I don't mean people who paint or basket weave or whatever, but people who put things into the world and call them good. This creative force made in the image of a creator. And what if fear attacks creatives in particular because it is jealous that it itself is not creative at all? Short of being given two gifts, the ability to throw its voice so it sounds like you, because if it sounds like Morgan Freeman, you could catch it every time. And the ability to shapeshift, to kind of put on these different masks of perfectionism, procrastination, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome. So chapter by chapter, what we go through in the book, that it's not a creative enemy, but it's a very slippery enemy. And I think that aspect in particular of, it can sound like us. There's a reason so many of these phases of fear, self-doubt, self-loathing, self-sabotage, include the word self, is because we actually believe we're the ones saying this to ourselves. And sometimes we are. Sometimes we are, I say in the book, why wouldn't fear try to sound like us? It already, like when it finds us, we're already speaking some pretty terrible words to ourselves anyway. So it can kind of slip right in undetected. And I sort of build on that and I say, listen, fear's not a very creative guy, but he is a productive guy. And like any good, productive overachiever who has loads to go get done, loads of people to go make them self-doubt and self-sabotage, he's learned how to prioritize. And so if you're already hiding in plain sight and playing small, he's going to mostly leave you alone. A little fear maintenance mode sprinkled in, some perfectionism, self-sabotage, you're all set. But show up and actually start to use your gifts and your story to make a difference in the world. And you better expect fear to show up, teeth bared and snarling. You're going to see that mask slip and you're going to see just how venomous he can actually be. But like a good game of rope-a-dope, Rocky IV style, we can use that against it. We can pull it in just close enough to wear itself out and then hit it with a knockout punch of, but you wouldn't show up unless the work I'm about to do really matters.
Yeah.
Because you know how to prioritize. So fear has just shown up. Good, you're about to do work that matters. And we flip it for this script. Good, I must really care about what I'm actually about to put into the world.
Have you seen, what you're saying kind of reminds me, have you seen there's this photo of like a huge stack of books and they're all about Abraham Lincoln?
No.
And the whole point of the photo and this just art display essentially is like everybody wrote a book about Abraham Lincoln in this stack, but they were all needed because they're all from different voices and they were all there for a reason. And I think sometimes they're like, well, if someone's already doing it. And it's just like some of those voices that you're saying speak into us. Yeah.
And you know what I would add to that is I think Christian women in particular do that a lot. Christian women in particular, I think, will go, if I raise my hand for this, or if I reach for quote unquote more, then that's me being prideful. And what if I end up making it all about myself? Or what if it goes to my head? Or what if I mismanage it? And so they go, listen, it doesn't really matter if I don't step forward and do it. Because look, all these other people are already doing the thing I want to do. So it's not like people aren't going to be helped by it. Like somebody, God can use somebody else. God doesn't need me in particular to do this. And to that, I say, it's not the point. God prepared this work for each of us in advance on purpose to do because the work itself works on us. Right? When we raise our hand in obedience, when we step forward, when we say yes to these things that feel scary, so much of the work that we're being called to do, it's because it first and foremost changes us. And then in a secondary ripple effect, it gets to change the world. But we miss out on everything God wants to do in us just because we think somebody else could do it better.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about like flipping the script to something that we care about. Like what does that look like to like name that fear and be like, okay, I really care about that.
Right. Yeah. This kind of bounces ahead even into the very last chapter of the book, which is success is a slippery slope. And that chapter starts off saying the underdog is a role of a lifetime. And what I mean by that is that if you're not careful, you could spend your whole life playing that part. And it talks about how the unlikely hero is the unmitigated darling of all the chanting masses. They love us so long as we're struggling for it every single solitary step of the way, as long as we are on our way up. They'll even root for us in the 30 seconds of glory when it finally all works out. Cue credits, roll scene, play the score, because we're underdog people. So the second we see our hero get everything they ever wanted, we're out. And we sort of know that in our underdog tropes in the movies. And we sort of know that about human nature, that, who doesn't get that kind of unqualified support? People who reach some level of success and actually keep it. We know that leaders wear a target on their back because they're out front. We know that, and it terrifies us. And so every time we start to feel ourselves getting to that breakthrough moment, pushing the boulder all the way up the mountain, we're almost to the top, like Wile E. Coyote about to get his comeuppance, we freeze when we make eye contact with everyone watching at home. Someone might actually read this book. Somebody might actually listen to this podcast. Somebody might actually come to this talk I'm giving. Just kidding. And we blink and we lose our grip and we lose our way and the boulder rolls all the way back down the mountain. And so, I think that is that feeling of it is much safer to keep starting over. It's much safer to keep letting fear push me back over the ledge and play small. I used to believe that the mountain was connected. It was a series of steps. And if you followed in just the right order and you pushed just hard enough, you would inevitably reach the top. And among entrepreneurs, because I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 20 plus years, so I coach people who want to start businesses a lot as well. There's something called the start to significance hierarchy, or the survival to significance hierarchy. And it talks about the stages you go through as an entrepreneur, where you start your business in the beginning and you're barely surviving. You're barely making ends meet. And then you make a little bit more and you start to get a little bit of stability. You're covering the bills month to month. And then you make a little bit more and you start to have security. Maybe you can even start to invest or scale or grow the business. And you keep going and people start to call you a success. And then inevitably, then what I believed is if you just kept pushing long enough, you would arrive at this place of significance. And as someone who has felt like the underdog my whole life, Steph, there's no place that I wanted to arrive more than significance. And that about, I want to say 3 years ago, maybe 2.5, I had this picture flash through my head. So I have that illustrated in the book with a bar graph made out of Legos. And if you zoom out, it looks like this mountain that is the running metaphor through the whole book. And the picture that flashed through my head is clear as anything I'd ever seen before. I kind of call it like a Don Draper worthy Kodak carousel, advancing slide, and then it's gone. Was that there should actually be a gap between the last two bars, between success and significance. There should be this final leap you have to make as you approach the top of the mountain. And the name of that gap, this speed-worthy, it's finished on the map gap, is called It's Finally Not About You Anymore. It finally stops being about you. So all of that stuff in the beginning, talking about flipping this script, our survival, our security, our stability, our success, our significance, that feels like all about us. But the inverse as well, our failure, our embarrassment, how we might be disappointed, how we might get our hearts broken. We make all of that about us as well, who might hurt us. And so we flip the script and we actually get to stick the landing when we say, I may very well get my heart broken. There's a reason that word passion means suffering. What am I willing to suffer to birth into the world? I may very well be disappointed. I may very well have moments of setbacks and failures. I will for sure be criticized. I promise you that. But when I flip the script and I stop saying what might go wrong, and I instead ask, yeah, but who might it help? Now it starts to change everything. When I wrote this book for 12 hours a day for 12 months, never once did I get up off the ground, my face buried in the carpet because I might get a gold star, because I might get to go on this or that show. I got up off the ground because I had a very clear picture in my head, 4 particular avatars of people I knew in real life that this book was meant for and who they represented, and how that might change those family trees and how that might change those generations. That is what got me up when it got hard, when passion felt like suffering. So we flip the script of who might it help, and then we use that as the real renewable fuel source that gets us up the mountain.
Yeah. And I think that's so important too, because when we're focusing just on ourselves, and whether that's we're focusing on our fear or the failure that we're inevitably going to experience and the setbacks,
That's
or
right.
just like the gold stars, you just do lose the point of what it is all about and what life is about. Because if we're always focused on us, it might feel good for a little bit, but it doesn't in the long run.
That's right. Sure. It's one of the unhappiest ways to live. 100%.
Yeah.
And I've tried it.
We all
I've tried it really hard. And I kind of talk about this idea of spending your whole life trying to prove people wrong, that they were wrong about you, or show people how far you've come. That there's no quicker way to end up this burned out hollow shell of yourself. Proving people wrong becomes a powder keg. And yeah, you can use what, that teacher said, you'll not be the one to make it out of town, as great jet fuel. And there's an internal combustion and it moves you forward. But like an internal combustion engine, those are going to wear out after a while.
Yeah.
That's not a commentary on EVs or that's not really about the cars. But my point being, when you're just exploding on the inside just to get a little bit of forward ground, a little forward momentum, you can't be surprised when it leaves you this burned out hollow shell. And I found myself there a bunch of different times. over and over because I kept trying to say one more accolade, one more achievement, and then I'll finally belong.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we always try to teach our kids that from a young age too, right? Like we're always telling our kids, like, you have to want this for yourself and you have to have a vision of what you're working for. You can't just work strictly for grades or because we're telling you to. You have to decide what you want and your reasoning for it, and it will make everything so much easier. I don't know why I expect them to understand that at such a young age.
That's good, though.
We're working on it, building it into them. As parents, we all want our kids to do well in school and feel really confident. Maybe you have a child who's struggling with a specific subject and needs a little extra help, or maybe your child is ahead and wants to really challenge themselves, or maybe you're like me and you just want to avoid the summer slide and head back to school strong in the fall. If you can relate to any of those things, you need to look into IXL. IXL is an online learning program that enriches your curriculum, whether it's homeschool or in-school curriculum. It offers practice in math, English language arts, science, and social studies while adapting to each child, meeting them exactly where they are. Plus, IXL encourages students to be curious and empowers them to choose how they learn. We have used IXL at our house for all of my kids, and it's been really helpful. We used it as a supplement to our math curriculum when we homeschooled, and then we used it for extra practice before tests too. So one of my friends has her son do some IXL work before math tests so that she can see that he has the material mastered. I thought that was a great idea, so we have done that too. Everything on IXL is organized by grade, subject, topic, and subtopic, making it really simple to find activities for the exact skills that you're covering. IXL is trusted by 15 million students worldwide and has been proven to improve performance in over 75 scientific research studies. That's amazing. You can make an impact on your child's learning and get IXL now. And Christian Parenting Podcast listeners get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/today. Again, you can visit IXL.com/today to get the most effective learning program out there at the very best price. If you're a woman, so much of your health starts with your hormones. When your hormones are off, everything else is off too, including things like your digestive issues, mood, mental clarity, energy levels, weight management, and so much more. But Hormone Harmony is a game changer for women who are struggling with hormonal imbalances that leave them just exhausted, physically and mentally. It only contains science-backed ingredients that bring back comfort, energy, clarity, confidence, and a sense of balance. Happy Mammoth is the company that produces Hormone Harmony, and it is famous for its zero compromise policy. That means no GMOs, artificial fillers, or flavors, or any other junk. Only science-backed ingredients in amounts that are clinically proven. The company, they surveyed 1,831 women to see how Hormone Harmony helped them, and the results are mind-blowing. So 86% of women started losing weight. 77% say it improved their mood, and 100% said that they were feeling like themselves again. Hormone Harmony over that has over 50,000 raving reviews from women all over the world, with 98% of them saying they'd gladly recommend it to their friends and family. You can try Hormone Harmony risk-free and get a 15% off your first order with code CPPodcast at checkout.
Can I tell you something interesting?
Sure can.
I kind of had the opposite growing up. I was actually paid for my grades. So if I got an A+, I got $5. And then it went down from there. So an A was like $4.50 and A- was $4. And, I got B+ and B. But if I hit, I think B- and for sure C+ range, I had to start paying my parents. And it was wildly effective. I got really good grades. But it taught me that there was a cost to being anything less than perfect, anything less than A+ performance, and that I was only as valuable or as worthy as what I could achieve. So I think that's really beautiful, what you're telling them.
That is so interesting. I feel like we could just have a whole nother episode just on that. Because there's no right or wrong way to parent and to raise your kids. And you got great grades. And my kids don't always get good grades, it's all up and down. But that's really interesting that was effective and then ineffective at the same time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
Yeah. Me too. I've spent some good time thinking about that for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that you have. Okay. There are so many other things that you talk about in this book. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit is the concept of overthinking. Because I think that's another thing that us parents, we are so good. Women in general, we are so good at overthinking. Just all the decisions I have to make, I'm like, what are the cons? What are the pros? Let's go back and forth and talk about all the potential things. Like let's talk about overthinking. Why is it draining? How can we get away from doing that all of the time?
Yeah, well, I'll start with this, that overthinking is exhausting. No, really, it's science. That's something I say in the book. So one of the things that happens when we get stuck in ruminating, when we're sort of just catastrophizing and cycling over and over on a thinking problem, is that we're trying to think our way out of a thinking problem. And anybody who's had writer's block, you know this feeling where it's like all the existential angst in the world gets pent up behind your forehead to the point that it feels like you're trying to sneeze through your forehead in order to figure out the next sentence. And as horrible as that feels, there is actual science that's happening there. So what's happening is when you're in overthinking, you get stuck in the prefrontal cortex. And that is the problem-solving center of your brain. It is the orderly, tidy, organized, color-coded, let's automate and batch process everything in our lives part of your brain. And it's really, really good at solving old problems with old rules. This has always worked before, so let me use that again. It's really great at automatic problem solving. The problem is when you're creating or you're innovating or you're doing something you've never done before, you cannot solve new problems with old ways of thinking. And so the more you try to think your way through a thinking problem, you overtax the prefrontal cortex. And there's this product called glutamate that is a byproduct of those neurons firing. And when you're really stuck in rumination, they start to reach toxic levels. And so scientists for a long time thought that your brain would switch out of the prefrontal cortex down into the limbic brain as just they always thought it was an excuse to go do instant gratification things that feel good. And that's part of it because your brain just wants to do what feels good. But scientists in 2022 at Oxford actually discovered there's a much more crucial service that does. And that's that the toxic levels are getting so high, it's actually going to start interfering with brain functioning. And so to preserve brain functioning, it switches you down into this, it's called an amygdala hijack. Let's go do something that feels good immediately to give us what's called immediate mood repair. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's something called Bayesian brain theory, which is more commonly referred to as predictive brain theory. And it essentially means that your brain is an incredible prediction machine. Before you ever start something new, it knows with great accuracy whether you will actually succeed or not. Take this thing to Vegas. It's got those kind of odds. It knows whether you're going to do well or not. And it's basing that on all of these inputs and data of what has always been true and what has always worked before. And so if you sit down to write your great American novel and you've never done that before and you don't have a track record of sitting through the edginess and staring at a blinking cursor, your brain goes, nope, this isn't going to work. We're not going to succeed at this. Record scratch, 90-degree turn. Let's go do something we know we can succeed at, like cleaning out that junk drawer or writing something on our to-do list we've already done and marking it off. If you've ever done that instead of writing that next chapter, this is your brain actually hijacking you. It is sabotaging you. But what's important to know is that the model of the Bayesian brain theory, the prediction machine, is constantly updating with new inputs. And so in this very cool way, the more that we can sit down and do hard things, even just a small, short, hard thing, and then increasingly larger, it's like little drops in the piggy bank, little quarters in the piggy bank, little inputs in the machine, and the model will update. You're essentially saying, look, we are people who can do hard things. We can sit through the edginess, and your brain will go, amazing. Now there's a 50-50 chance or a 60-40 chance, and it won't immediately hijack you away to do something easier. So the more we do hard things, ironically, paradoxically, the more we are then able to do hard things.
I think it's just so cool how our brains are wired to
me too,
more or less protect us from the things that we're afraid of, from the hard things, and then set us up to do those hard things. That is so incredible.
Yeah, neuroplasticity, the Hebb's law, the whole idea of rewiring the neurons that wire together. What a beautiful way that our brain was made that we can at any day wake up and decide to change. Dave Ramsey gives that speech where he's like, turn around, go the other direction. At any moment, we can decide to change our lives, change our thinking, change what has always been true and what will be true from here on out.
I would love to switch out of this overthinking and take a step and retrain my brain and work on the neuroplasticity. And what are some, just a few practical steps that they can do to just do something small today?
Yeah. Well, that's it right there. What you just said really truly is this small idea. So the subtitle is The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. In chapter 3, that's where the work of this book really begins. And then right after chapter 3, there's a double page breakout spread called The Shift. And so really quick version of that is I had seen a post on social media of a shot glass, and it said, it was on one of these cheesy success accounts I like to hate follow on Instagram. And it said, if you think you have the capacity of a shot glass, then anytime you get a little bit more than that, you will subconsciously self-sabotage until, and then I added, you can fit back into the tiny containers you think you belong in. And I had seen that post, and then I had Dr. Allison Cook on my podcast, The Mary Marantz Show, and I was asking her about it. And I said, how do we stop doing it if we don't even know we're doing it, if it's subconscious? And we pulled up this part of her book, The Best of You, that said, especially for those of us who didn't grow up with a sense of stability or security, if there was a sense of chaos in our childhood and this survival mode got switched in us, we can continue to return to that over and over because it feels familiar, and familiar equals comfortable, and comfortable equals safe. So in our minds, chaos equals safe. But we, as the grown-up in the room, can actually start to reteach ourselves a sense of safety. And she said, you do that by setting small, so manageable, bite size, building up the muscle, small but important. They have to matter to you. You have to actually care about them. Small but important commitments to yourself and actually keeping them. She said, as you do that, you are showing yourself, Mary, that there is a grown-up in the room who can be trusted. That grown-up is you. And I burst into tears on the spot because I think so much of my life had been about blinking at that breakthrough moment because on some level, something in my story, something in somebody's story listening taught us it wasn't safe to trust anyone, including ourselves. And so, we take that into the practical. So that double page, shift is ironically and paradoxically, we think that the opposite of playing small is to always go big. Swing for the fences, leap and the net will appear. And I'm a huge fan of the go big moment. I've had quite a few of those in my life. The problem, Steph, is that they always felt like something that had happened to me and not someone I was becoming. They didn't have a chance to kind of sink down into my very identity. It's this idea that when you set a goal, you only get to celebrate on one day, the day the goal actually comes true. Whereas when you set intentions, when every day you wake up and say, who do I have to be today in order to become the person who can eventually stand in the shoes of that goal, then every day we do that is a cause for celebration. And so that's the kind of blanket statement as we set small but important commitments in that area and we actually keep them. So in imposter syndrome, for example, one of the ways we undo the belief of imposter syndrome, the magical ritual thinking of imposter syndrome, is that we have to expect to fail in order to succeed. That if we were ever to get the hubris to believe we were actually going to do okay on this interview or this exam or writing this chapter, that would be our downfall. And so we battle that back by walking into small situations and going, I actually think I'm going to do okay on this. I'm prepared. I know my material inside and out. I've been honing the craft of the interview. I think it's going to go really well. Steph's a really nice person. I bet she's going to ask really great questions. We're going to have a great conversation. And then when we do, that's one little drop in the bucket, one little update of the model of like, look, you didn't have to beat yourself up just to get an A+ that time. You didn't have to rip yourself to shreds and pretend that's the most important thing about you. The most interesting thing about you is how hard you are on yourself. You could actually walk into a situation with some self-kindness and compassion. Self-kindness is compassion turned inward. And wait, you actually did better because you weren't completely exhausted from ripping yourself to shreds for hours before you hopped on. Look at all this energy you had because kindness is resilience. So that's one example of how we can take that blanket practice of small but important commitments and then apply it to one of the chapters, which is imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good and so important. And I just feel like everyone needs a reminder over and over and probably every morning, every hour.
Yeah.
All of
right.
the time.
Same.
So to kind of wrap up our time, we've covered a lot and you've been so encouraging already, but do you have any final advice for a parent or just someone who's feeling small and feeling stuck and underestimated and feeling like they're called to something more, but just feeling all the things that we've talked about and just doesn't really know what to do?
Yeah, I think if there's anything I could leave people with, it would be if I could just really, truly get you to be as bored with fear as you are with hearing those same excuses come out of your mouth for the 5th year in a row. We all know that. We all know those excuses that you've been telling yourself and telling your spouse and telling your friends and telling your family, and you hear it, and even you don't believe it when you say it anymore. If I could get you to be as bored and fed up with the lies of fear as you are with your own excuses, then I think you would be set free. And that, Steph, is really, truly the work of this book. So one of the fun things we know about humans is that they learn best from story and really visual, visceral, unexpected metaphor. Mustard seeds and mountains. What? Where did that come from? Wildflowers and birds. Wait, what? We're talking about humans, right? And so the greatest teacher on the planet knew that humans are wired to learn from story an unexpected metaphor. The unexpected part's actually kind of important because since it's unexpected, it stands out. This is why Jesus taught the way that he did. And so, when you think about this idea of the unexpected, there's a book called Purple Cow from Seth Godin, which is 10,000 brown cows on the side of the road driving through Minnesota. From Kansas to Minnesota. Are those sort of near each other?
Midwest.
There we go. You're going to stop paying attention. Your friends would think, your family would think you're lost it if you go, oh my gosh, brown cow. But if you're driving on that highway and you see a purple cow, you're going to pull over and take a picture of it. Mm-hmm. You're going to remember it. You're going to tell your friends about it. You're going to pass that story down. And so if I can talk to you about fear in really unexpected ways, there's an Edward Scissorhands analogy about the missing handbook for life those of us with hard stories feel like we are walking around in the world with or without all the pertinent parts. And therefore, we feel like somebody else will always have more information than us. They'll be more qualified than we are. Now, the next time you hear fear using your own voice, and there's this great saying that the fish don't know the water's toxic because you're so immersed in it, that visual, visceral, unexpected metaphor cuts through it. And some of those scripts I mentioned earlier, you go, wait a minute, that's actually on page 34. Wow, fear, you saw her give me the handbook with all the scripts you've been using and you still didn't update your material? That's really sad, right? And so we catch fear mid-sentence, we catch mid-syllable. And I was on a podcast with Sarah Rice called This Changes Everything, where she said it's like in The Wizard of Oz, the great and powerful, terrifying Oz, until we pull back the curtain and it's just a man standing back there. And I said, a snake oil salesman who wants to sell us on the grift that doing nothing is somehow preferable to doing anything that would create any kind of failure at all. Creating nothing is better than creating any kind of failure at all. And so if I can give you all of these really unexpected ways of remembering exactly what fear is up to, then you can catch it mid-sentence, name it, all of its power whooshes out of the room, and we can move forward anyway. So in short, fear is really boring. It's a really, really boring liar. And I'm going to show you step by step throughout the chapters how and why that's true.
Yeah, fear is really boring. It's just one of my new favorite phrases, I think. I'm going to say it all the time to my kids.
Yes.
It's lovely.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us where we can connect with you and get your book. It's just and I'll put that all in show notes. People can find you.
Yeah, definitely. If you go to namethefear.com, which is from that subtitle, namethefear.com, we have the whole first chapter up there for free. So that's chapter 1, starting over as a rolling boulder. You will get a feel for my writing, which is very lyrical and intellectual at the same time, poetic and pop culture side by side. And so you'll get a feel for the writing. You'll get a feel for how I'm going to set up that problem. And then if you like the book, you can also order it on namethefear.com. It's available anywhere books are sold. And then we also have on that same website, about midway down, we put together an achiever quiz. There are 5 different achiever types. Depending on your type, you play small in different ways and you need different things to get you unstuck and moving forward. It takes 2 minutes to take. The questions are super light and easy. The results are super deep. I'm going to tell you if you are a performer, always proving other people wrong, a contortionist or classic people pleaser, we contort because it is easier than to be criticized, a masquerader hiding in plain sight, a tightrope walker who could care less who else is clapping, but needs higher and higher death-defying feats to feel the same amount of good, or the illusionist in the distance who needs all of the conditions to begin and they themselves to be perfect before they can even start. That's at achieverquiz.com, or you can also find that on namethefear.com. And then it's at Mary Marantz on Instagram. Come tell me which achiever type you got.
Yeah, I'm going to go find out what type of achiever I am.
Do it.
Yeah, I will. I absolutely will after this.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'll get it all in show notes. Other people can too. But thank you so much for being with me today. I truly think this is so fascinating and it's so important. And I think it's going to be really helpful. And I know you're busy, so I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for having me. It was so good to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for spending time with us on the Christian Parenting Podcast. Mary's story is such a powerful reminder that our past does not disqualify us and that fear doesn't get the final word. Whether you're wrestling with self-doubt or stepping into something new, remember that God's strength is made perfect in your weakness, and He has already equipped you for the road ahead. If this episode encouraged you, we'd love for you to like, subscribe, and leave a review. Every bit of support helps us reach more parents walking the same path of faith and growth. I hope you have a wonderful week. As you continue to show up for your family and pursue the calling God's placed on your life, may you have the courage to rise above fear, the wisdom to trust His timing, and the peace to know He's with you every step of the way. Hey, this is Steph Thurling, Executive Director of Christian Parenting and host of the Christian Parenting Podcast. Every month, thousands of parents read and listen to our podcasts, articles, and digital resources. Did you know that in the past 12 months, the shows on our podcast network have been downloaded over 4 million times? Each one of those numbers represents a life, and we are deeply moved that so many people are receiving accessible, trustworthy, and timely biblical guidance through our resources. If you have been impacted by Christian parenting, we would love to hear your story. Visit christianparenting.org/testimony to tell us about how Christian parenting has impacted your family and your faith. That's christianparenting.org/testimony, or just click the link in show notes.